Hello and welcome to this breaking news episode of What Most People Think. In the week where the sale of Greenland was suddenly on. Was that this week? Probably. And then there were going to be tariffs on European countries that opposed the sale. And then, well, I'm recording this on Thursday. And Trump gave a couple of fairly batshit speeches. And it feels like, I don't know, you know what Trump does? He gets the snow globe of global geopolitics. He shakes it up, and sometimes that snow globe comes back down. But it's been kind of breathless stuff. And as I keep saying, this is a UK-based podcast, so we'll start closer to home because there's news in the UK economy regarding inflation and unemployment. Can you guess what it is, love? Higher or lower? Has it gone higher or lower? Well, I think we've all got a fairly good guess. There was also another interesting PMQs where could Kemi keep up her recent run? She's been doing well at PMQs, but could she keep it going? And we have the first interjection from Bobby Jenrick, Robert Jenrick Lamar. He got a question at PMQs, and we also had the first polls suggesting how that defection has done. Obviously, I keep an eye, particularly from patrons, with feedback about episodes. There were a couple of, I deal with a couple of things. There was a couple of people that were cross with a little bit of the Ian Stone episode where he had a pop about Brexit. And I mean, like, that's the kind of the point of this podcast, is that we don't do echo chambers. Do you know what I mean? And that's how Ian feels about Brexit. He has to sit there and withstand me saying that Labour MPs are all virtue signallers. So, you know, it's kind of a bit of give and take, but there were a couple of people that came back on that. But, you know, I hope you understand that, you know, in this podcast, you know, we speak to people we agree with, people we don't. While everyone else is disappearing into sort of bunker of how they feel, I'm trying to keep the conversation going. I did think as well about Brexit, and I think I might have mentioned this in response to him, but is really interesting with Sadiq Khan, who has been one of the most vocal Labour opponents of Brexit, and he was one of the guys saying, you know, this is going to affect the city of London, and they're all going to leave, they're all going to go to Frankfurt. And that hasn't really happened, has it? And the City of London want to avoid reintegration into EU or closer relationships. I mean, I suppose with the Frankfurt thing, and if there is anybody listening in Frankfurt, one of the things that we didn't really consider when we were saying that everyone was going to sort of migrate to Frankfurt is those people would then have to live in Frankfurt. Now, I'm not saying that Frankfurt isn't a wonderful city, right? Although I haven't ever heard anyone talk about it particularly, I would say London's pretty great. I know that there's, you know, the right-wing narrative, London's a hellhole of no-go areas. Yes, it has problems, certainly with thefts against a person and stuff like that, but it is also still a great city. So that was a bit of Remain rhetoric that didn't really come to pass. Rachel, I'll probably get complaints about Remainers now. That's the point, isn't it? There's a range of stuff on this. Do you know what I'm finding recently is that if you are, like I'm centre-right, but if you are anywhere nearer the centre at the moment, you always used to get the most criticism for being lazy, centrist dad. I actually think that's the new edgelord position because everyone thinks you're bad. You know what I mean? Like the lefties still think you're right-wing, the right-wingers still think you're left-wing. You're getting it from all sides. So hang in there, fellow right of centrist dads. And the other feedback I got was about Rachel Fairburn. Majority everyone loved the episode, but we spoke about incels, involuntary celibate males, and the idea that was discussed on the Diary of a CEO podcast that the state should get involved in helping younger men find women. And she said that men need to work on themselves, and she implied that their expectations of the women they could get were a bit, deluded. Now, there was some feedback on that. I would say that, the reason I spoke to Rachel about it was because, it's from a female point of view. Maybe, she's been in that dating pool recently. But again, I would also say that she has had to sit there and listen to me saying that repeatedly that women are a fucking nightmare on a lifelong emotional roller coaster. And also on a recent episode, I think it was Rachel on it when I talked about the fact that young women online are being pink-pilled into a life of singledom and misery. So again, it is a give and take. Piss take prices, keep these coming in. You can email whatmostpeoplethinkuk@gmail.com, or you can use the hashtag piss take prices on like X social media. I give them a sweep every once in a while to see if there are any new ones. Here's a couple of ones I've got in. This was Diane. I think this was on X. Diane found 2.5 litres of paint for, just in your mind right now, think of what 2.5 litres of any paint could possibly cost. 2.5 litres, all right? £48. £48. I mean, that is like, imagine you went to a petrol pump, right? And they were dispensing paint, and that would look fucking weird. Especially if it was white paint, because that would look like, anyway. That would be, all right, I'm going to do my maths here. Oh, fuck. All right, 2.5 per litre, that would be £24. Oh, that was, no, oh my God. Oh, my maths is shit. Anyway, it'd be around 20 quid a litre if you were dispensing it. Just one litre. So I don't know where that was from, but that seems a lot of money. 2.5 litres of paint. I don't even know how many rooms you can decorate for that. Given how tight I'm becoming, my wife would probably be pulling her hair out because I'd be trying to make that do the whole house. And we also had a message from Paul. This was from Facebook, and quite a few people talked about ticket commissions. What is it now? Service handling charge, venue facility fee. That's not the artist or the event doesn't have any control of that. Venue facility, and then handling fees on top of that. It's just like, look, for the process of taking the payment, there's a fee. And, you might have to sign up to PayPal and all of that stuff. But that has gone way, way beyond what it could possibly cost. And then also, when you just go handling fee, I mean, that is literally like mafioso style. Hey, we did this for you, you do for us. Let's call it £1 per ticket handling fee. It's getting ridiculous, especially with events that are overpriced. And I would say that's part of the reason that I keep my tour tickets around the 20 quid mark, because I'm out there just trying to offer value, guys. I would say this as well, but Paul experienced this while going to an NBA game. Paul, don't go to American sports. I'm sorry, Paul. Guys that go to American sports in the UK, I'm sure that otherwise you're nice guys, but in this matter, you are weirdos. NBA as well. I just don't get it. I don't get it. Like, when it comes to NFL, you go, it's a bit like rugby. And then when you look at ice hockey, you go, it's a bit like football. NBA, I don't have a frame of reference for that, where they just continually go up the other end. I mean, I know I'm sounding ignorant to basketball fans, but they go up the other end, slam dunk, fucking alley-oop, whatever. And then, and it only really comes to life in the final quarter where the score difference, matters, or it's good. Look, and I know that you could criticise any sport in this way. You could say cricket, what is there? It's just 5 days and it could still be a draw. Well, I want to be open-minded about this, but you're wrong. Okay, so just don't go to American sports in the UK. They're going to be overpriced. This is Donald Trump was talking about the ticket prices in the US for the US World Cup as though it was a good thing. So just bear that in mind. New Patreons. We don't often get this, but we've got 3 names together that I think work quite well. Andrew Freer, Rob Savage, and Elena Eckhart. You sound like a band. You sound like one of those 3-piece type things. What is it? Starship, Jefferson Starship? I don't know. Like in the 90s, you remember there was Garbage? Stupid Girl, do you remember that? Stupid Girl. That's not a bad tune, but although she had a meltdown on stage recently about some left-wing stuff. It was about men. It was about men. There was a guy that was heckling her and being a knob, and then she went on a rant about men. So maybe I should get her on the podcast. I think you sound like a kind of prog rocky type band together, where it turns out we latterly find out that one of you was dating and then you were dating the other one. It caused a rift. The 2 blokes couldn't get on, and women, eh?
What most people think.
Am I trying to now overcompensate after the critiques of the incel thing? Women, eh? I do enjoy it. Sort of saying those old-fashioned 1970s things in that way. Oh, fucking hell, those are those. Right, thank you to people who've already bought tickets for Belfast. Belfast, we man. What about you? But I would say this is it's 140 capacity. I can't sell loads and loads of tickets there, and we're about half sold. But this gig, it's the only one that involves flights and accommodation. Basically, I take a loss on this gig. So please, if you're in Belfast and you're thinking of coming, buy the tickets now. Tell your friends, because every time this one goes in, it goes slowly, and it's one for the blood pressure. I look forward to the Belfast show so much, but it's now like the 4th tour I've gone there, and it just slowly ticks over. So do come to the Limelight. It's on a Saturday as well. Not all my shows are on Saturdays this time. I can tell you when it is. It is on the It is on Saturday, the 14th of March, so it'd be great to see you there. There's a couple of other bigger venues where we could do with pushing them on. They're doing all right, but Stockton, I'm coming to Stockton. I'm definitely not going to slag it off like James cleverly. What was it he said? Because it's a shithole. And then, I don't know, he tried to wriggle out of it. But I will be very positive about Stockton. Loughborough, we had a good turnout there last time, and it's doing all right, but we could do with a kick on. Ipswich, again, similar deal, big room. Would be great to see as many of you there as possible. And Derby, I loved that show in Derby, and also Lincoln. So do go to Live Nation if you live in those places. Tell your friends, and it'd be good to see you there. The fuck you is to ChatGPT, or as Boris Johnson says, ChatGPT. It's a little liar. ChatGPT is a little liar. So this is going to sound seriously. This is like, people in the public eye Googling themselves, the ego of that. Well, ChatGPT is quite handy because you can actually find out stuff that you've said. You know what I mean? It's almost like being in a relationship. You know, when a couple have been married 20 years and the other one has to finish the anecdotes. Babe, what was it I said on that holiday when we was in Marbs? So ChatGPT is a bit like that. And I was kind of trying to find out what the characterized, like what stuff I'd said about Donald Trump, in podcasts or whatever. And it said that it had a fairly accurate overview of my take on Trump, which is kind of like criticisms of him. Is he truly, a conservative as such? Is he useful? But also, that people, criticising people on the liberal left who are unable to see when he's done anything useful. But then it also said, would you like some direct quotes? And I said, yeah, sure. And then it quoted about 5 things, and actually from magazines, newspaper interviews, that were just lies. I just hadn't said them. You know what? I wish I had said some of them because they were really bright, stuff that I would never have the vocabulary or understanding to say, like, Donald Trump is a challenge to the neoliberal geopolitical, just is not me. And I said, hi, ChatGPT, I'm Jeff Norcott, and I didn't say any of these things. And the worst thing was, I would have preferred it if it just said, oh, okay, that's an error in the system. I believe that you had. It basically acted like somebody that had been caught lying. And he went, yeah, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. My bad. I shouldn't have said that you'd said. I was like, oh, fuck, you're just lying. And then I was thinking, oh, shit, AI, of course, it's intelligence, right? It's like a personality. And like anyone, sometimes, if your job is to be smart and to know stuff, you don't want to ever admit, I just don't fucking know that. So you come up with an answer. I've heard of this reference in what they call it, like the tech world calls it AI hallucinations. I just call it lying. It's like, in primary school teachers just don't know shit. And then you think, oh, fuck it, they're 6. I'll tell them any old bollocks. ChatGPT was just making stuff up. So, I know that I just can't. I'm not saying that a mid-range comic being lied about by ChatGPT is the kind of instalment of Terminator that we're all waiting for, but it certainly alarmed me. Okay, let's talk about the week's politics, and let's start with the economy. Yeah, meanwhile, back in Labour's economy. Right, so yeah, we had some numbers this week. We had some numbers. Inflation. It had been going back down a bit. And Labour, who came into office with it at 2% and then had overseen it going back up, took a lot of credit for the thing that they'd made go back down. We've got inflation. It's going back down under this government. It went down also under the last government. And yeah, it's gone back up. I think it's 3.4% in December. And, it's that standard thing. If you took credit for it going back down, you've got to take credit maybe for it going up. But no government really accepts that kind of responsibility. But it's just fairly immediate with Labour, and it's sort of happening in real time in front of our eyes. I would also say that, they'll talk about the previous government, went to 11%. You go, yeah, but there was a specific thing happening there, post-COVID inflation, the invasion of Ukraine, the energy price spike. What? This is kind of you. This is like your inflation spike. And, you also look at like mortgage cuts. When Labour tell their story of their time in office, obviously something they're proud of it, but breakfast clubs, we've had breakfast, there are kids up and down the country having croissants. And look, for the people that it really matters to, great. I'd also argue that just giving breakfast to people whose families can afford it is... Anyway, that's not what this is about, right? They'll talk about mortgage cuts, mortgage rate. We've had 4 mortgage rate cuts. But you actually compare that internationally, right? Now, mortgage rates sort of went up in lockstep with the European Central Bank. And that's called the ECB. Look, there's cricket. You've got to change your name, lads. It went up quicker in the UK as a consequence of the trust budget, but they all went to roughly the same level of increment, and the Fed in the US. But we've had less cuts than both of those things, right? And that's because inflation has been stubbornly high in this country, and that's partly because of how this government have been handling the economy. Now, do you want to have your second guess? Unemployment, the amount of people not in work that wish to work, that's also up, right? That's also up. And also like the thing is what's that David Domain might be able to tell me here is anecdotes are the thing you should pay attention on. Statistics lie, it's anecdotes. It's something like that. I think Konstantin mentioned it recently. And if you just think, I would imagine you will know somebody now who is out of work, who wishes to work, but can't, right? And that largely wasn't the case during the 14 years. Mostly, unemployment was really low for those that wish to work, right? And now it is different, whether it be, because the hospitality sector's contracted, the impact of AI, but it is sort of materially different now. Now, I would say this, that, the Tories' record on unemployment was really, really good. There were record numbers in work, record low numbers in unemployment. Also, now you look at what happened with PIP, they certainly took their eye off the ball there. Universal credit happened, and we're like, great, and people came off disability benefit, great, but a lot of them fucking moved on to PIP. And I'm going to say it, heartless right-winger that I am, I don't think all of it is completely legitimate. There you go, I said it. And the problem is they need to take this on. Welfare is the big ticking time bomb. Because they had their chance to seize the nettle, didn't they? But they didn't. And then more people claiming welfare, out of work, higher taxes, work doesn't pay. It's it depresses me to think about it. So let's move on. But it did all of which made me think that Starmer, he could actually do with a bit more Trump nonsense. Do you know what I mean? He could do with a little bit of the distractions here, because I would imagine that I haven't looked at Starmer's personal ratings over the last week. I'd imagine people rally a bit when under attack. It's like when you're a couple, you know what I mean? You're sitting there, you've had a couple of overpriced bottles of Sauvignon Blanc, and you're having a slanging match, and then someone else comes over and says, can you keep it down? You go, you fuck off. Nothing like turning your anger externally. But he could do with some of that. If I was Starmer, I'd be sending Trump text messages trying to rile him up, because I just say, I need you back out on Greenland, you fucking bitch. Because if the focus is on our economy, the last thing this government want is scrutiny on how they're running that. So then we had PMQs, right? So Kemi came into it on a hot streak. I do sometimes think I would love it if PMQs was covered like a kind of sporting event, you know what I mean? You just have people in the studio there. You join us here for PMQs. One of those really over-dramatic trailers for a match. Do you remember you used to get them in the early day of Super Sunday where they'd have all like action film music? Can Kemi keep up her hot streak, or will Keir Starmer get out of the bottom 3? And who would it be? Richard Keys and Andy Gray. But anyway, that was another era as well. But Kemi was on a hot streak, and naturally this week there was going to be a focus on international issues. Could she use this? Could she keep up the hot streak whilst straddling an awkward issue? And no, she couldn't. Because what she did was she discussed Chagos Islands. She focused on that alongside Donald Trump's rant about it. Now, the thing about Donald Trump, right, is him bringing up the Chagos Islands is without doubt, out of complete self-interest, a little bit of a hissy fit. Maybe he just kind of figured that Starmer was his little poodle and he'd just kind of go along with it when push came to shove. Now, that doesn't mean that the criticisms aren't legitimate, but directly aligning. I mean, in fairness to Kemi, she did say, look, I'm with the Prime Minister on Greenland and stuff, but even associating this attack on Chagos with Trump, I think was a mistake, because it seemed like we needed a bit of national unity. And also in UK politics, alignment with Donald Trump is a net loss. Whatever people listening to this podcast think, or whatever people on X think, it's why Farage has slightly tempered his message on it. I mean, he's kind of like, Farage has almost gone from my mate Donald to, yeah, we went to school together. Anyway, don't bring up school with Nigel. And yeah, the criticisms of Chagos are legitimate, right? Because we had it and we're giving it back, and we seemingly are paying billions to rent it, but mainly for the US. And the US did say they were up for that. I think Marco Rubio signed off on that. But anyway, Donald Trump suddenly changes. He's having a little strop. And there are principles at stake, one of which is, like, you know, Starmer on the one hand this week has been talking about, you know, the fate of Greenland must be for the Greenland, what are they called, Greenlanders? Greenlanders. They must be for the Greenish, the Greens, I don't know. What are they called? David Domain, that's one for you, to decide. But also, like, that no such thought was given to the Chagosians. Fucking hell, I'm in a world of pain here. Jesus Christ. The Chagosians... The Chagos, are they just referred to as a people? I don't know. But so maybe Kemi thought, I'll put him in a difficult position here. But I think he kind of won this exchange, Starmer, because he was more strident in his criticisms of Trump than you'd have expected him to be. He sort of said, well, I did speak to Donald Trump, and he said one thing the other day, but he did say he's changed that. And I would just say, we will not yield. He used the word yield. It's quite a good word, actually, for him to use. We will not yield. And I think he's in the right place in terms of public opinion, because as predicted in the main show earlier this week, I said that, broadly speaking, I thought, you know, given the threat of tariffs, the British public would kind of get behind, if not Starmer, Britain as such. And a YouGov poll suggested 67% of people support retaliatory tariffs. Now, would they endure the impact of those tariffs if push came to shove and the economic effects? But no, broadly speaking, we don't like being bullied. You know, so there were two mistakes, really. There was the sense of an alignment with Trump on Chagos, and she didn't. I mean, who could have predicted that Keir Starmer was going to grow a little set? His little Tic Tacs grew to the size of grapes, didn't they, as he stood up? Because the thing is Starmer does very well when he feels like he has the moral high ground. The moment he knows he's on shaky, he doesn't have the bluster of a Boris, you know, or a Trump, or a Blair, to just know that he's slightly in the wrong, but just fight out the moment, you know. And he was back to, I suppose, in a way, it was a little bit like Partygate. Do you remember Partygate? That was, you know, when people like remember like their university years, the best years of their life. I think Keir Starmer does that with Partygate. He's got little trinkets in his house. You know, like students would collect old beer bottles. He's got like little photos of him just pointing at Boris. And he was, you know, very much, I would say to the Honourable Lady, it's a time of national unity. But she would, he was on one, right? He was on good form, best performance for a while. And Kemi kind of looked like you know that thing when you're already lost driving around a town, and then you drive into the roughest estate. You're like, quickly get the map, for God's sake, start arguing with your partner. And then Starmer went on, you know, to sort of seemingly like, fuck, I'm actually doing all right. I enjoyed it. He had a couple of good lines about, actually had one for the Greens, which was, what is he said about the Greens? They're high on drugs and soft on Putin. Which is interesting, because the question asked was an actual environmental question. So, you know, for the right-wingers, you know, the people who are suspicious of the Greens, like me, you know, you're like, hey! But also he's hemorrhaging support to young people. So there's two ways that clip plays out. Is somebody like me who's not going to vote for him anyway, he goes, oh, that wasn't bad. But the young people go, oh, he really doesn't give a fuck about the planet, you know? And on the subject of the Greens, Zach Polanski, my God, this week... just let this lad speak. I think people say he's a great communicator. I think what he's doing is dabbling in a lot of economic positions that a lot of young people would like. But on defence, what was it he said? We've got to pull out of NATO. We've got to get all the US bases closed in the UK. Get rid of our nuclear deterrent. It's brilliant, isn't it? Yeah, just all that. Yeah, because Vladimir Putin, he'll just go, all right, well, you're no longer a threat. We're cool. Yeah. And you know what? If he does fire nukes at us, we can respond by firing fucking compost on the way back.
What most people think.
Just a quick one on Bobby J, Bobby Jenrick, Robert Generic. By the way, people call him Robert Ozempic. I would say this: I'm no Bobby J fan, but like, you just don't do stuff with male politicians that you wouldn't dare do with female ones. I've heard, like, you know, just don't. All right, maybe he lost a lot of weight, maybe he took Ozempic, but only do that if a female. If you've got the fucking balls, right? If a female politician dramatically loses weight, right? Let's see if you're up for calling them Ozempic. Yeah, we'll see. But he stands up. He gets picked, so he's bobbing, which is a thing in PMQs where you haven't been picked for a question, but you just stand up and you just think, fuck it. I mean, I would just do that anyway, just see. And then the speaker goes, Jeffrey Norcott. I'll be like, didn't expect to get picked. I was just wondering, I'll just say to everybody in the house, I'm doing drinks at mine at the weekend. Does anybody fancy it? But Robert Generic, he stands up and he gets a bit jeered by also, you know, by the Tories and by Labour. But then he does this very shrewd thing, is he picks a very emotive subject, which is to do with his constituency. Ed Davey's very good at this. I'm sure that it matters to him, but also it's very politically shrewd, because then once people realise he's talking about something which was about a former prison security guard being tracked down years after and being murdered. So there's that amazing thing in the Commons where they're all going, yeah, and then someone goes, shut the fuck up. It's almost like they're like an assembly, aren't they? Would have been stared at by the head teacher. They go, he's talking about something serious, shut the fuck up. And so he gives his little talk, and it was well delivered. He is a good communicator. Look, I think overall, in terms of campaigning, probably reform will benefit from him in the long run. Should be said that the polls were they were either reform stayed where they were. There was a couple where the Tories gained, and there was one where the reform lost quite a lot. So I think the kind of postscript to the whole Bobby J defection is that the reform haven't really gained. The Tories might, in the polls, gained a little bit. I don't know, peel off those kind of like those soppy Lib Dems from the right of the Lib Dem party. They're happy he's no longer. I don't know, but it's undeniable that when it comes to campaigning, I do think, as much as I hate to say it, Bobby J will be an asset to them. Jesus, giving generic, almost called him generic, giving generic credit and Starmer credit in the same episode. Jesus, where are we going next? All right, Donald Trump. First thing, what happened with the international news? International news is mental. How quickly it moves on for things that are going to reshape the geopolitical vista for generations to come. I mean, Venezuela. Anybody? Venezuela? Is it all right? I don't know. Who's running it? I don't know. Who's in power there? I don't know. But a week and a half ago, I was all about Venezuela. Gaza. Is that all right? Is it okay? Is Gaza okay? Are we still pushing for a peace deal in Ukraine, or are we just going to let that one simmer? No idea. And then, of course, the reason we're not talking about any of that stuff is because Donald Trump is shaking up the snow globe of the world. Literally, in the case of Greenland, he's got to have it. I got to have Greenland. And then he can't have it. And then the tariffs are on for the European nations. And then he gives his year in power speech in the States, which was pretty bizarre at times. Only a year. Jesus Christ. He just wears you out, Donald. Do you know what I mean? You know, like when you have a play date with someone else's kid and the kid's got way more energy than yours. It's just exhausting. And so he gives that speech, and then he's 80. And then the next day he's on a plane to Davos, and he's giving another speech. Now, let's leave aside whatever feelings you have, positive or negative, about Donald Trump. The fact that this man can physically do this at his age without passing out is remarkable. I couldn't gig. I'll do 5 tour shows on the Spin. I'm like lying down in a darkened room. So, firstly, credit where credit's due. Well done, Donald, for being able to say words. However, the coherence, I would say, you know, even the biggest Trump fan, you've got to you've got to at least acknowledge that there was a coherence issue. You know, it was just rambling. There was no plan for this speech. He was just fucking riffing. You know, like I would see, you know, like the kind of like comics doing work, like really famous comics doing work in progress gig. It was literally like no notes. I'm just seeing if there's anything in the room for this. Greenland? No. Okay, there was this other thing I had about the Panama Straits. No, all right, I'll come back to that one. Yeah, there's something there. I think there's something there. But he did, you know, he said a lot of mad shit. You know, he had pops at Britain. He said some legitimate things about Britain's relationship with his energy sector. But he also said, you know, just incredibly petty stuff. But, oh yeah, also, he said something about Macron. Let's see if I can find that.
Emmanuel Macron, I watched him yesterday with those beautiful sunglasses. What the hell happened?
That, in a way, is an example of what makes Donald Trump a comic genius, is sometimes you can just say the thing that no one else is willing to say. Everyone's thinking, what the hell is going on with those fucking sunglasses? And his reason is kind of like you're going, really? Blood vessel? I mean, that means you're that vain. I don't know, man. I don't know. The internet certainly had its own theories. But, you know, the kind of big takeaway, what everyone was waiting for, was what's he going to say about Greenland. And what he said was, I'm not going to use force, right? And in the Overton window of Donald Trump, that is amazing. In the space of a week, Donald Trump saying he's not going to use military force against a NATO ally. We're like, yes, fucking good in there. I'm not going to do tariffs, but, you know, it's sort of, he looked a bit spurned, to be honest. Bless him. He was like, so I guess I'm not going to get it. I mean, some people read it like this was a threat, but I just thought it was just him being a bit cross. And he said, well, you know, you're not going to help us, but we will remember, you know, like a high school girl that tried to launch a rival prom and nobody attended. He was like, well, let's see you next time. And it's interesting because, you know, the European nations sort of led and kind of organised a bit by Starmer have gone for, like, you know, let's tongue the ring piece of Donald. Let's just get right up there, you know. Let's just kiss his ass. Let's flatter him. Let's do all that stuff, you know. Let's give him a letter from the king, you know. The letter from the king has been the strategy, more or less. And this did seem to be the point where the European nations just went on a strategic level. I don't know if this is working anymore. It's also really fucking embarrassing. Do you know what I mean? We've all got pride. You know what I mean? It's just we look pathetic. I think the Democratic governor, Gavin Newsom, he actually called it out. He was just like, it's just really sad to see. He's like just giving him fucking gifts and stuff. So, and the truth with Donald Trump is he's very kind of strategic. And I would say that if he'd only ever want more. So they found... He'll just wonder what else he can get, right? Now, there's no point angering him unnecessarily. That's just stupidity. And what he's doing is acknowledging and utilising America's military and economic might, right? Now, the previous presidents have done that. He's just very transparent and radical about what he's doing. So you do need to be alert to that. But equally, just rolling over is not a strategy anymore. So that was interesting to see how that played out. I don't know what his next play on, you know, Greenland is. Maybe you'll just do an overnight sort of send in a squad and just fucking take the capital Nuuk. He'll be there on the Chinook. Chinook? No, anyway, that's a gag for another time. But anyway, what I was thinking about Donald overall is about his energy levels and, you know, his decision making, what he thinks are priorities. Some of this is, well, look, we're all tired and ratty. We all say weird things. And I think that just on a human level, a guy doing a very long speech one day and then flying to Davos at his age and doing another one the next day, you got to look at him. He's like, you know, the Republicans got to say he's a big game player, you know, and he's not the player he was. I don't think there are some people saying that he's got cognitive decline in the same way Joe Biden did. These are not the same things. Sorry. You know, Joe Biden just literally fucking not knowing what day of the week it was and whether or not, you know, calling countries by names that haven't been called in 40 years. Although, having said that, Donald Trump did call Greenland Iceland. But I don't think we're seeing the same thing here. What we are seeing is a man who is acting absolutely in accordance with being an 80-year-old man who's very busy, right? So I just think, you know, like Mark Wood as a bowler for England, you got to kind of manage him, you know? You got to only bring him out for the big games, okay? So you got to manage... You got to manage his workload. You need impact player. That's what you need with Donald Trump. Like, the Republicans need to start using him as an impact player. Because I think with the way that he's been talking, and I do think that some of his base in this last week, even some of the most loyal kind of Trump adjutants will have looked at what he's saying and how he's saying and thinking, fuck. Okay, that is the end of the episode. What do you think? There's quite a lot of stuff there for you to respond to. Remember, if you're a Patreon, you can message me, or you could, when I post it, I often look at the comment section to see how people are reacting. You can do a direct message. Emails I pick up less often, but every so often, whatmostpeoplethink@gmail.com. And also, recommend this to your friends. You know, I still think that's the most important thing in terms of something growing. I really love doing the show, and I'd love it to grow more and do it more. And one of the things that also helps is reviews. 5-star reviews really help, particularly on Apple Podcasts, where I can actually find them and read them, but on Spotify, Podbean, wherever you get them. And also remember to follow and subscribe to the podcast. Still, I can see from the numbers, loads of people, you literally search it every week. Come on, Grandad, stop being a boomer. Just find the button, press follow. This is someone who says, off to Spotify. This is Guido, who says, a second 5-star rating, as Jeff didn't read out my first review. Love this podcast, as balanced, funny, and not left-wing nonsense. So leaving Apple to Spotify as a download, as allegedly gets more dosh on there instead of here, and needs all he can to replace his car. So there's two things there. The money difference is not through ad revenue. I'm talking about if you sign up to be a Patreon. So if you do that through the Patreon website or Android. The second issue is I got a new car. So that was a reference to my documentary about universities. I got a new car eventually, and it is a Renault hybrid, and I don't want to make anybody jealous, but I'm getting 48 miles to the gallon. See you next week.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Tap the banner to learn more and get a quote at USAA.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
As America's most trusted movers, Mayflower has seen it all, from big dreams and new beginnings.
All right, here we are.
Oh, it's perfect! To first steps and fixer-uppers. From starter homes.
So guess what? We're having another.
Another? We definitely need more space.
To more practical homes. Yes, Mayflower has been there for it all and will always have your back. Every moment, every move, every step of the way. Schedule your move now by going to Mayflower.com.